Alexandria Washington sat frozen in the courtroom, her law degree and 20 years of public service rendered invisible by her skin color. Officer Brennan smirked as he testified, fabricating lies about her aggressive behavior during a routine traffic stop. His partner, Officer Sullivan, whispered something that made the judge chuckle. The all-white jury nodded along. None of them knew she was the newly appointed Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, starting Monday. Alexandria's phone buzzed with a message from the president. "Let it play out. We'll handle this differently." What would happen when they finally discovered who they were really messing with? If you believe in justice prevailing against all odds, hit that like button and subscribe now, because tomorrow's special episode reveals how power structures crumble when least expected. Alexandria Washington's day had begun with the phone call that would change her life. The president himself had offered her the position of Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, a nomination she had accepted without hesitation. After 20 years climbing through the ranks of public service, from prosecutor to policy advisor, her dedication had finally been recognized. The announcement would be made public on Monday, giving her the weekend to prepare for the media storm that would follow. Alexandria had celebrated quietly with a small dinner, savoring this moment of triumph before heading home in her 2-year-old Mercedes, a splurge she had allowed herself after winning a major case last year. The streets of Oakwood Heights were quiet that Friday evening, the affluent neighborhood's large houses set back from immaculately maintained roads. Alexandria drove carefully, always conscious of how quickly a black woman in a luxury car could attract unwanted attention. She maintained exactly the speed limit, used her turn signal well in advance, and kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. These were not just good driving habits, but survival tactics she had learned growing up. The flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror made her stomach drop. Alexandria checked her speedometer. Exactly 35 miles per hour, in a 35 zone. She signaled and pulled over smoothly, positioning her car perfectly. As she waited for the officer to approach, she placed her hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, clearly visible through the rear window. Officer Brennan approached from the driver's side, while his partner, Officer Sullivan, circled around to the passenger window, hands resting casually on his weapon. The deliberate intimidation tactic wasn't lost on Alexandria. "License and registration," Brennan barked without introduction or explanation for the stop. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, officer?" Alexandria asked calmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You were driving too perfectly," Brennan said with a smirk. "Nobody drives that carefully unless they've got something to hide. License and registration now." Alexandria kept her right hand visible as she slowly reached for her purse. "I'm reaching for my license," she narrated her movements, following the rules of engagement that every black parent taught their children. "Just hurry up," Sullivan snapped from the passenger window, his flashlight beam intentionally shining in her eyes. Alexandria handed over her license and registration. Brennan studied them with exaggerated suspicion. "This your car, Ms. Washington? Seems pretty nice for someone from West Side," he remarked, referencing the predominantly black neighborhood across town. "Yes, it is my car. I live in Oakwood Heights. Now just 3 blocks from here," Alexandria replied, maintaining her composure. Officer Brennan's radio crackled. "I need a check on a black Mercedes, possible stolen vehicle," he spoke into his shoulder mic, completely ignoring her statement. "And documentation." "Sir, the registration clearly shows the car is mine," Alexandria pointed out. "Ma'am, we've had reports of luxury cars being stolen in this area. Step out of the vehicle, please," Sullivan ordered, already opening her door without waiting for compliance. Alexandria carefully unbuckled her seatbelt. "Am I under arrest or being detained? What is the legal basis for asking me to exit my vehicle?" Both officers tensed visibly at her knowledgeable questions. "Just following protocol, ma'am." "Don't make this difficult," Brennan said, his tone hardening. As Alexandria stepped out, Sullivan roughly grabbed her arm. "Hands against the car, spread your legs." "This is unnecessary. I have not committed any traffic violation," Alexandria stated firmly, though she complied to avoid escalation. "Talking back to an officer, resisting commands," Brennan muttered as he began to handcuff her. "You people always think you know the law better than we do. The cuffs snapped painfully tight around her wrists. Alexandria winced, but remained silent, as Brennan began patting her down with inappropriate thoroughness. "Sullivan, check the vehicle," Brennan ordered. Without a warrant or probable cause, Officer Sullivan began searching Alexandria's car, rifling through her glove compartment and center console. From her position against the car, Alexandria could see Sullivan slip something small into his pocket before producing a tiny plastic bag and holding it up. "Look what we have here, Brennan. Seems our lawyer lady has been having some extracurricular fun." Alexandria's blood ran cold. "That is not mine. I saw you plant that evidence," she stated clearly, hoping her voice carried to any potential witnesses. "Did you hear that, Brennan? She's accusing an officer of planting evidence. That's a serious allegation," Sullivan said mockingly. "Might need to add defamation to the charges." Brennan pushed a document in front of Alexandria. "Sign this confession that the drugs are yours, and we might be able to keep this quiet. Wouldn't want your fancy law career ruined over one mistake." Alexandria straightened her spine despite the uncomfortable position. "I will not sign a false confession. I know my rights and I know what you're doing is illegal." Sullivan's face darkened. He grabbed her arm harder, twisting until she gasped in pain. "You think your law degree makes you special? Out here, we're the law." As they forced her toward the patrol car, Alexandria managed to activate her phone's recording function with her restrained hands, the device still in her back pocket. A small victory in what was becoming a nightmare. Through the rear window of the police cruiser, Alexandria watched in horror as the officers continued searching her car. She clearly saw Brennan pocket her expensive watch from the center console, and Sullivan remove something from her laptop bag. They weren't just framing her, they were robbing her in plain sight. Alexandria was marched through the back entrance of the police station, the officers deliberately bypassing the main intake area with its security cameras. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the dingy corridor, leading to the booking area. Officer Brennan kept a tight grip on her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her skin, leaving marks that would bloom into bruises by morning. "Got a special one here," Brennan announced to the booking sergeant, a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a permanent scowl. "Caught her with drugs in Oakwood Heights. Claims she lives there too." The sergeant barely looked up from his computer. "Name?" "Alexandria Washington," she answered firmly. "Didn't ask you," the sergeant snapped. "Officer?" "Alexandria Washington claims to be some hotshot lawyer," Sullivan replied, emphasizing claims with obvious skepticism. Alexandria maintained her composure as they processed her, taking her fingerprints and mugshot. "I am entitled to a phone call," she stated. "Phones are down," the booking sergeant replied dismissively. "Technical difficulties, maybe tomorrow." They confiscated her belongings, cataloging them with deliberate sloppiness. Alexandria noticed that her watch and gold earrings were not listed on the property sheet. "My watch and earrings aren't on the list," she pointed out. The sergeant looked at her blankly. "What watch? What earrings?" "The ones Officer Brennan and Officer Sullivan removed from my car," Alexandria stated calmly. "Careful with those accusations," Brennan warned, leaning close enough that only she could hear. "Prisons are dangerous places for women who don't know their place." Alexandria was escorted to a holding cell already containing 6 other detainees, 5 of whom were people of color. The lone white woman, arrested for drunk driving, was called out within 30 minutes. 2 hours later, 3 more detainees were processed. Alexandria and 2 black men remained. After 4 hours, Alexandria again requested her phone call. "A chase?" Different officer shrugged. "System still down." "That's convenient," Alexandria replied. "Is there a supervisor I can speak to?" "Listen, lady, you're not special. Wait your turn like everyone else." By hour 6, Alexandria had observed multiple white detainees brought in, processed, and released on bail while she still sat waiting. When she finally approached the bars again, she spoke loudly enough for others to hear. "I'm being deliberately detained without due process. I would like to speak to Captain Reynolds immediately." The mention of the captain's name created a subtle shift in the officer's demeanor. "I'll see what I can do," he muttered. Another hour passed before Alexandria was finally allowed her phone call. She dialed her sister Maya, keeping her voice steady despite her exhaustion and anger. Maya, I've been arrested on false charges. I need you to bring my bar card, state ID, and come to the central precinct immediately. They've been holding me without processing for nearly 7 hours. After hanging up, Alexandria was returned to the holding cell. An officer she hadn't seen before approached. ID issue has been resolved. We can process you now. What ID issue? Alexandria questioned. Says here we couldn't verify your identity. The officer replied, not meeting her eyes. That's false. My driver's license was in perfect order, as you well know. Maya arrived 45 minutes later, clutching Alexandria's professional documentation and barely containing her fury. The siblings shared the same tall, dignified bearing, though Maya's academic career had taken her in a different direction from Alexandria's legal path. I've brought my sister's documentation as requested, Maya informed the desk sergeant, sliding forward Alexandria's Bar Association card, backup state ID and business cards from the Department of Justice, where Alexandria had worked for the past decade. The sergeant glanced at the documents dismissively. These could be fake, we need to verify. Alexandria, now standing beside her sister, took a deep breath. I am Deputy Secretary Alexandria Washington of the Department of Homeland Security. You can verify my identity with a single phone call to Washington. The room fell silent before Officer Sullivan, who had been loitering nearby, burst into laughter. Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security? Lady, you've got some imagination. Next, you'll tell us you're friends with the President. Several officers joined in the laughter, their mockery echoing off the station's bare walls. Alexandria stood straight, her dignity intact despite their ridicule. The commotion attracted the attention of Captain Reynolds, a veteran officer with silver hair and a reputation for fairness. He approached the desk with a frown. What's going on here? Before anyone could answer, Alexandria addressed him directly. Captain Reynolds, I've been detained for over 8 hours on false charges. Officers Brennan and Sullivan planted evidence during an illegal search of my vehicle, stole my personal belongings, and have denied me due process. Captain Reynolds studied her for a long moment before turning to the sergeant. Process Ms. Washington immediately. Release on her own recognizance. But Cap, she had drugs in her car, Brennan protested. Process her now, Reynolds repeated firmly. And I want both of you in my office first thing tomorrow, he added to Brennan and Sullivan. As Alexandria gathered her remaining belongings, noticeably fewer than what had been taken, Captain Reynolds approached her quietly. Ms. Washington, I apologize for what happened here today. I assure you there will be a thorough investigation. Alexandria nodded cautiously, allowing herself a moment of hope. Maybe there were still good officers in the department. As she and Maya prepared to leave, she glanced back and froze. Through the half-open door of the evidence room, she could clearly see Officer Sullivan removing something from an evidence bag, replacing it with another item. He was tampering with evidence, right under Captain Reynolds' nose. Have you ever experienced someone abusing their power when they thought no one important was watching? Comment number 1: if you believe police stations should have cameras in all areas to prevent evidence tampering. Like if you think Alexandria should use her position to fight back immediately, and subscribe to see more stories about justice prevailing against corruption. Would Alexandria be able to gather enough evidence against these corrupt officers before they destroyed it all, or would the system protect its own again? The morning after her release, Alexandria sat at her sister's kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. She hadn't returned to her own apartment, fearing the officers might show up there. Dark circles underlined, her eyes testament to a sleepless night, spent replaying every detail of her arrest and detention. You look terrible, Maya said bluntly, placing a plate of toast in front of her sister. Eat something. Alexandria managed a weak smile. Thanks for the sympathy. I'm not being unsympathetic, Maya replied, sitting down across from her. I'm being practical. You can't fight this if you collapse from exhaustion. Maya Washington, a tenured professor of criminology at Georgetown, had always been Alexandria's pragmatic counterpart, balancing Alexandria's idealism with hard-headed realism. Now she pulled out a notebook and pen, ready to strategize. We need to collect every scrap of evidence before they destroy it all, Maya stated. I've already contacted Derek Travers at the ACLU. He'll meet us at his office in 2 hours. Alexandria nodded. First, we need the dashcam footage and body camera recordings. Already requested through proper channels, Maya confirmed, though I wouldn't be surprised if they claim technical malfunctions. Alexandria's prediction proved correct. When they met with Derek Travers, a veteran civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on police misconduct, he had already received a response to their records request. They claimed the dashcam footage was corrupted due to equipment failure, Derek reported, his weathered face creased with familiar disappointment. And Officer Brennan's body camera was supposedly not activated during the stop. Alexandria's jaw tightened. Convenient. What about Officer Sullivan's camera? Maya asked. That footage is under review and unavailable, Derek replied with a grimace. They're covering their tracks, Alexandria said. We need to move faster than them. Over the next several days, they assembled what evidence they could. Maya used her academic connections to pull records of complaints against Officers Brennan and Sullivan, revealing a disturbing pattern. Both officers had multiple complaints of racial profiling filed against them, though none had resulted in disciplinary action. Look at this, Maya said, pointing to a spreadsheet she'd created. 87% of their traffic stops involve people of color, in a district that's only 23% minority residents. Statistical evidence of bias, Alexandria nodded, but we need more. Alexandria filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, detailing every aspect of her ordeal. The IA officer assigned to her case, a Detective Jenkins, seemed genuinely concerned by her account. This isn't the first complaint about those two, Jenkins admitted during their interview, but it's the first from someone with your credentials. My credentials shouldn't matter, Alexandria replied firmly. Every person deserves equal treatment under the law. I agree, Jenkins said, lowering his voice, but we both know that's not how it works in practice. Your complaint might actually go somewhere. Meanwhile, Alexandria's colleague from the Justice Department, Sandra Baxter, offered legal assistance and moral support. The department has your back, Alex, Sandra assured her over lunch. Whatever you need. What I need is for this not to happen to anyone else, Alexandria replied. A breakthrough came when Alexandria remembered the recording she'd managed to make on her phone. Though the officers had confiscated her phone during booking, the cloud backup had preserved most of the encounter, including clear audio of Sullivan announcing he'd found something after Alexandria had seen him put his hand in his pocket. This proves they planted evidence, Alexandria told Maya and Derek, playing the recording in Derek's office. It's circumstantial, but powerful when combined with everything else, Derek agreed. The case began attracting media attention after a local reporter got wind of a prominent attorney being wrongfully arrested. The initial coverage was cautious, but the racial element quickly became the focus. Black attorney claims racial profiling by police, read one headline. The police union responded almost immediately with a statement defending the officers and questioning Alexandria's character. The officers involved followed standard protocol based on reasonable suspicion, the statement read. We urge the public to reserve judgment until all facts are known. As the story gained traction, Alexandria felt a momentary sense of victory. The truth was coming to light. Public pressure might force accountability where the system had failed. That feeling evaporated the moment she returned to her apartment after a week staying with Maya. The space looked untouched at first glance, but Alexandria's trained eye caught the subtle signs of intrusion. A book on her shelf was angled differently. Her laptop was closed, though she always left it open. The bathroom towels were folded in a slightly different pattern. With growing dread, she checked her hiding places. The backup copy of her phone, recording stored on a small USB drive concealed in a hollowed-out book, was gone. Alexandria called Maya immediately. They've been in my apartment. The backup recording is missing. Are you sure it wasn't just misplaced? Maya asked. I'm sure, Alexandria confirmed, fighting to keep her voice steady. They know I have evidence and they're eliminating it. The violation of her home, the one place she should have felt safe, struck Alexandria harder than she expected. Someone, likely the same officers who had humiliated and falsely arrested her, had invaded her private space, searching through her belongings at leisure. The message was clear. You are not safe anywhere. Later that evening, Detective Jenkins called with disturbing news. "Washington, you need to be careful," he warned. "I've been looking into Brennan and Sullivan's history. They're part of something bigger. There are senior officers protecting them." "What are you saying, Jenkins?" "I'm saying watch your back. These aren't just bad apples. They're part of a system." Alexandria hung up, a chill running down her spine despite the warm evening. The evidence was mounting that this wasn't just about two racist officers, but something more organized, more dangerous. And now they were targeting her directly, sending a clear message that her home, her sanctuary, wasn't beyond their reach. The story exploded onto local news the following morning with the headline, "Justice Department Attorney claims police planted evidence, racially profiled her." Alexandria's professional headshot appeared alongside grainy images of Officers Brennan and Sullivan captured from previous news coverage. Within hours, national outlets picked up the story, framing it as yet another example of systemic racism in law enforcement. Alexandria's phone rang constantly with interview requests, which she declined on Derek's advice. "Let the evidence speak for itself," he counseled. "Anything you say can be twisted." The police department's PR machine sprang into action, releasing a carefully worded statement. "The Central City Police Department takes all allegations of misconduct seriously. A thorough investigation is underway, though preliminary review suggests officers followed proper protocol during the traffic stop in question. We caution against rushing to judgment based on one-sided accounts." Alexandria watched the department's press conference from Maya's living room, where she'd relocated after the intrusion at her apartment. Captain Reynolds stood stiffly beside the police chief, his discomfort evident as the chief defended the officers. "Notice Reynolds won't make eye contact with the camera," Maya observed. "He knows they're lying." The story quickly polarized public opinion. While many expressed outrage at Alexandria's treatment, others scrutinized her background, looking for any reason to discredit her. An opinion column in the conservative City Herald questioned whether Alexandria had an agenda against law enforcement, citing her work at the Justice Department during a period of increased federal oversight of local police departments. "They're digging into my professional history," Alexandria noted, showing Maya the article. "Looking for anything to paint me as anti-police." "Of course they are," Maya replied. "You're a threat to their system." Social media became a battleground. The hashtag Not Just Justice for Alexandria gained traction, but so did much as back the blue posts defending the officers. More troubling were the anonymous accounts posting Alexandria's home address and workplace, accompanied by thinly veiled threats. "You should get off social media," Derek advised during their daily check-in call. "Nothing good comes from watching this play out online." Alexandria reluctantly agreed, though Maya continued monitoring the situation. "You need to know what they're saying about you," she insisted. A breakthrough came when a prestigious law firm, Hartwell & Reed, offered to represent Alexandria pro bono. Their senior partner, Jonathan Hartwell, had a long history of civil rights work and the resources to match the police union's legal team. "This case has national implications," Jonathan explained during their first meeting. "If they can do this, to someone with your credentials, imagine what happens to those without your resources and connections." Alexandria agreed, though the pressure was mounting. The White House had contacted her twice, concerned about how her case might affect her upcoming appointment. Both times, Alexandria assured them she was handling the situation. She couldn't tell them the full truth, that she was increasingly afraid for her safety and that of her family. While researching potential conflicts of interest among the local judiciary, Maya made a disturbing discovery. The president of the police union, Michael Thompson, is Judge Thompson's brother, she told Alexandria. "The judge who'll likely preside over your case." "That can't be legal," Alexandria said, stunned. "It's a clear conflict of interest." "It's not illegal if nobody points it out," Maya replied grimly. "And who's going to challenge a judge in this town?" The threats escalated from online harassment to physical intimidation. First came the anonymous letters to Alexandria's office and Maya's home containing racial slurs and vague threats. Then late-night phone calls, silent except for background noises that sounded disturbingly like gunshots. Alexandria maintained her public composure, but privately the toll was mounting. She barely slept, jumping at every sound. When she did sleep, nightmares of the arrest plagued her. The constitutional rights she'd spent her career defending felt suddenly fragile, theoretical protections that disappeared in the face of raw power. The final straw came when Maya called in a panic from her children's school. "Alex, someone's been talking to the kids," she said, her voice tight with anger and fear. "Tyler came home asking why police want to hurt his aunt. And Zoe says a boy in her class, whose father is a police officer, told her that our family should watch our backs." Alexandria felt the blood drain from her face. "They're threatening children now." "This ends today," Maya declared fiercely. "No one threatens my babies." That evening, as Alexandria prepared for the preliminary hearing scheduled for the following day, she received an unexpected message from an anonymous email address. "Not all of us agree with what B&S did to you. Check your mailbox." Inside Maya's mailbox was a USB drive containing a complete copy of Officer Sullivan's body camera footage. The footage, the department had claimed, was under review. Have you ever stood up against a system only to find it fighting back 10 times harder? Comment number 1. If you think Alexandria should release the video to the media immediately, like if you believe corrupt officers should face the same penalties, as civilians who break the law and subscribe to follow Alexandria's journey to justice. Will the preliminary hearing expose the corruption, or will the brothers Thompson protect their own? Can Alexandria turn this damning evidence into a victory against systemic injustice? The courthouse stood imposingly against the morning sky, its grand classical architecture a stark contrast to the tension brewing inside. Alexandria arrived early, flanked by Maya and her legal team, all presenting a united front of calm professionalism. Despite the crowd of reporters swarming the entrance, she wore a tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, every inch the respected attorney rather than a defendant. "Remember," Jonathan Hartwell murmured as they approached the security checkpoint, "Judge Thompson will likely show bias. We document everything for the appeal." Alexandria nodded, her face betraying nothing as they passed through security and made their way to courtroom 3B. The preliminary hearing was ostensibly to determine if there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, but Alexandria knew it. Was really the first public battle in what was becoming a war. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat representatives from various civil rights organizations, community leaders and concerned citizens. On the other, uniformed police officers formed a blue wall of solidarity behind Officers Brennan and Sullivan, who sat with their union attorneys looking confident, even smug. Judge Harold Thompson entered, and Alexandria immediately noted the family resemblance to the police union president. The same heavy brow, the same slightly asymmetrical jaw. The judge's gaze swept over the crowded room, lingering disapprovingly on Alexandria before he called, "The court to order. Case number 2023 CR 4872, State versus Alexandria, Washington," the bailiff announced. Judge Thompson peered over his reading glasses. "Let's get something straight from the start. I won't have my courtroom turned into a political circus. This case will be tried on evidence alone, not media narratives or public sentiment." Despite his claim of impartiality, the bias became apparent immediately. When the prosecution presented the drug evidence allegedly found in Alexandria's car, Judge Thompson accepted it without question. When Jonathan moved to have it excluded based on illegal search and seizure, the judge waved away the objection. The officers had reasonable suspicion based on the defendant's presence in an area known for recent luxury car thefts, Judge Thompson ruled, despite no documentation supporting this claim. When Jonathan attempted to introduce Alexandria's phone recording, Judge Thompson frowned. This recording was obtained without the officer's knowledge or consent. It's inadmissible under state wiretapping laws. "Your Honor," Jonathan argued, "State versus Martinez clearly established that citizens may record public officials performing their duties in public spaces. This recording falls squarely within that precedent." "I'm familiar with the case law, Counselor," Judge Thompson replied coldly, "but I find this situation distinguishable. The recording is excluded." Throughout the morning, this pattern continued. Prosecution evidence, no matter how questionable, was admitted. Defense evidence faced insurmountable procedural hurdles. Alexandria maintained her composure, though inwardly she seethed at the mockery of justice unfolding before her. When Officers Brennan and Sullivan took the stand, their testimony was a masterclass in structured deception. They described Alexandria as immediately hostile, refusing to comply with simple commands, and exhibiting behavior consistent with drug use. Their stories aligned perfectly, too perfectly, as if rehearsed. During cross-examination, Jonathan's brilliance shone through. He methodically highlighted inconsistencies in their timeline, the lack of documentation for their claims, and their history of similar complaints. Officer Brennan, in the past 5 years, you've had 17 complaints filed against you for racial profiling, is that correct? Jonathan asked. Objection, the prosecution shouted. Prior complaints are irrelevant and prejudicial. Sustained, Judge Thompson ruled immediately. Jonathan pivoted. Officer Brennan, you testified that Ms. Washington was driving suspiciously by following all traffic laws precisely. Is law-abiding behavior now grounds for police suspicion? Brennan shifted uncomfortably. In context, yes. Most people don't drive that perfectly unless they're hiding something. So, to be clear, Jonathan continued, in your view, a black woman driving lawfully in an affluent neighborhood is inherently suspicious. That's not what I said, Brennan protested, his face reddening. Isn't it? Jonathan pressed. What exactly was suspicious about Ms. Washington's behavior other than her race and presence in a white neighborhood? The question hung in the air as Brennan struggled for an answer that wouldn't explicitly reveal his bias. It was the totality of circumstances, he finally managed. Despite Judge Thompson's obvious bias, Jonathan's cross-examination exposed numerous contradictions. Sullivan claimed Alexandria had refused commands she couldn't possibly have heard at the distance initially stated. Brennan couldn't explain why his body camera was turned off for a traffic stop when department policy required it. Neither officer could produce documentation of the alleged luxury car theft ring that had supposedly prompted their suspicion. By midday, media coverage was turning decisively in Alexandria's favor. Reporters live tweeting the proceedings highlighted the officers' inconsistencies and the judge's apparent bias. Outside, the crowd of supporters had grown, carrying signs demanding justice. Judge Thompson, visibly irritated by the shifting public, narrative called a recess. During the break, Alexandria overheard him speaking harshly to someone on his phone. This is getting out of hand. She needs to be put in her place. When court resumed, Thompson's demeanor had hardened further. When Jonathan attempted to call Detective Jenkins from Internal Affairs to testify about the officer's history, Thompson refused. Detective Jenkins has no direct knowledge of the events in question, the judge ruled. His testimony would be hearsay and prejudicial. The afternoon brought one surprise victory. Alexandria's anonymous source had provided not just Sullivan's body camera footage, but text messages between the officers discussing setting up troublemakers in the Heights. Jonathan managed to enter these into evidence through a technical loophole, catching the prosecution unprepared. These messages directly contradict the officers' testimony about their purpose and intent during the traffic stop, Jonathan argued. They establish premeditation to target drivers based on race in affluent neighborhoods. For once, Judge Thompson couldn't find a procedural reason to exclude the evidence. The messages were admitted, prompting visible anxiety among the police contingent. As the day wore on, Alexandria's legal team methodically constructed their narrative. A respected attorney, racially profiled, illegally searched, framed with planted evidence, and now facing the full weight of a system designed to protect its own. Though Judge Thompson repeatedly sustained the prosecution's objections and overruled the defenses, the truth was emerging through the cracks. Outside the courthouse, protests grew. Chants of "Justice for Alexandria" and "End qualified immunity" echoed through the streets. Judge Thompson responded by threatening to hold protesters in contempt, though they were well within their legal rights. Any disruption of these proceedings will not be tolerated, he warned, glaring specifically at Alexandria's supporters in the gallery. I will clear this courtroom if necessary. By the end of the day, Despite the judicial obstacles, the preliminary hearing had achieved something crucial: public exposure. Through careful questioning and strategic evidence presentation, Jonathan had revealed the officer's inconsistencies and the system's bias to the watching world. As they prepared to leave, Alexandria noticed Judge Thompson in deep conversation with his brother in a side corridor, both men looking worried. The police union president gestured angrily while the judge nodded repeatedly. The brothers suddenly spotted Alexandria watching them and fell silent, expressions hardening. Alexandria left the courthouse with mixed emotions. The bias had been blatant, but the truth was emerging regardless. As Jonathan had predicted, Judge Thompson ultimately ruled there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, setting a court date 6 weeks away. "We expected this," Jonathan reassured her, "but we've accomplished our real goal today. We've exposed their methods to public scrutiny." Alexandria nodded, exhausted but resolute. "What happens next?" "They'll escalate," Maya predicted grimly as they walked to their cars under the protection of private security. "They've been exposed, and cornered animals are the most dangerous." Maya's prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. That night, Alexandria discovered the anonymous source who had provided Sullivan's body camera footage had been identified and transferred to an administrative position in records, effectively silenced and punished. And Judge Thompson had signed a gag order, preventing Alexandria from discussing case details publicly, a restriction not applied to the prosecution or police union. The system was retaliating, just as Maya had warned, but they had underestimated Alexandria Washington. She hadn't fought her way through 2 decades of institutional barriers to back down now. As her team had revealed during the hearing, Alexandria had built her career taking on powerful interests who believed themselves above the law. This fight was personal, but it was also something more a test case for whether justice truly applied equally to all. Alexandria awoke to the sound of breaking glass. Disoriented, she fumbled for her phone, dialing 911 before she even fully registered what was happening. The dispatcher's voice seemed distant as Alexandria cautiously made her way to her living room where the sound had originated. There, illuminated by streetlights filtering through the blinds, was a brick surrounded by shattered glass. Someone had thrown it through her front window. "Ma'am? Are you still there?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," Alexandria replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Someone has vandalized my home." Approaching cautiously, Alexandria noticed something attached to the brick. A note secured with a rubber band contained a single word written in large red letters: "Nigger." When police finally arrived 45 minutes later, Alexandria recognized the deliberate delay for what it was: another message. The responding officers took minimal notes, suggested it was probably just kids, and left without dusting for fingerprints or canvassing for witnesses. Alexandria called Maya immediately after they left. "It's escalating," she said simply. "Pack a bag," Maya replied. "You're staying with me again." But Maya's home proved no safer. 2 days later, Maya narrowly avoided a serious accident when her car suddenly lost control on the highway. The mechanic later confirmed her brake lines had been cut. "This wasn't an amateur job," he told them, pointing to the clean, precise cut. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." When they reported the tampering to police, the officer took cursory notes and suggested Maya might have driven over something sharp. The deliberate dismissal of clear evidence left both women shaken. Jonathan Hartwell called with more bad news the same afternoon. "Someone broke into our offices last night," he informed Alexandria. "They only targeted files related to your case." "Security cameras?" Alexandria asked. "Disabled," Jonathan replied grimly. "This was professional. The pattern was clear. Systematic intimidation designed to force Alexandria to drop her case, but each act only strengthened her resolve. "They're scared," she told Maya that evening. "These aren't the actions of people who believe they'll win in court." The most disturbing development came when Alexandria called Detective Jenkins to report the escalating harassment. His department voicemail stated he was on indefinite administrative leave. When she managed to reach him on his personal number, Jenkins sounded defeated. "They've transferred me to patrol duty in the South District," he said quietly. "Effective immediately." "The South District?" Alexandria repeated, stunned. The South District was notorious as a punishment assignment high crime, minimal resources, career suicide for an experienced detective. "Internal Affairs is closing your investigation," Jenkins continued. "Official finding, insufficient evidence of misconduct." "That's impossible," Alexandria protested. "The evidence is overwhelming." "Evidence has a way of disappearing in this department," Jenkins replied bitterly. "Washington, these guys are protected from the top. Whatever you've stumbled into goes higher than just two racist beat cops." After hanging up, Alexandria paced Maya's living room, connecting patterns: the swift punishment of anyone who helped her, the coordinated intimidation, the judge's relationship with the police union. This wasn't just about a traffic stop gone wrong. It was about protecting a system. A breakthrough came unexpectedly. An anonymous email arrived containing internal police department communications officers discussing Alexandria's case, coordinating harassment, planning evidence tampering. The source identified themselves only as someone who still believes in the badge. Alexandria's security clearance investigation for her upcoming Homeland Security position had been proceeding in the background throughout the ordeal. Now her FBI contact reached out with troubling information. "We've uncovered something concerning during your background check," Agent Garcia informed her during a secure call. "Several officers in your local police department appear to be involved in a pattern of civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and possibly extortion." "I'm experiencing it firsthand," Alexandria confirmed. "This goes beyond your case," Garcia continued. "We're seeing connections to multiple dismissed cases against minority defendants, suspicious property seizures, and financial irregularities in the department." The FBI information confirmed Alexandria's growing suspicion. The corruption wasn't limited to two officers, but was systemic, involving judges, prosecutors, and senior police officials in a coordinated operation targeting minorities. Public pressure was building too. Media coverage of Judge Thompson's obvious bias during the preliminary hearing had prompted the Judicial Review Board to recommend his recusal from the case. Though he fought the recommendation, mounting evidence of his conflicts of interest, including financial connections to police union funds, eventually forced him to step aside. Alexandria should have felt vindicated by this victory, but the harassment only intensified. Officers in patrol cars began parking outside Maya's home at all hours. When Alexandria left for meetings, they followed her openly, making no pretense of normal surveillance. "They want you to know you're being watched," Maya observed. Classic intimidation tactic. Then came the most devastating blow. Alexandria's mentor from law school, Judge William Marshall, was found dead in what police quickly labeled a robbery gone wrong. Marshall had been one of Alexandria's most vocal supporters, using his considerable influence to draw attention to her case. "So this wasn't random," Alexandria told Jonathan during an emergency meeting. "Marshall was helping me access sealed records about previous complaints against these officers." "Are you suggesting they murdered a federal judge?" Jonathan asked, looking deeply troubled. "I'm suggesting nothing happens by coincidence in this case," Alexandria replied. Maya arrived late to the meeting, her face ashen. "I found this under my windshield wiper," she said, sliding a photograph across the table. It showed Alexandria entering Marshall's chambers 2 days before his death. Written across it in red marker: "Who's next? Have you ever felt the system closing in around you when you tried to stand up for what's right?" Comment number 1. If you think powerful people should be held to higher standards, like if you believe Alexandria needs to publicly expose the entire corruption network before someone else gets hurt, and subscribe to witness her most dangerous confrontation yet. Will the death of Judge Marshall be the tipping point that finally brings this conspiracy to light, or will Alexandria be forced to choose between justice and survival? The courthouse buzzed with unprecedented security. Metal detectors beeped continuously as crowds filed through, subjected to searches far more thorough than usual. Armed officers lined the corridors, their presence ostensibly for protection, but feeling more like intimidation. News vans clogged the streets outside, reporters jostling for position, their cameras trained on the grand entrance. Alexandria arrived with her expanded legal team, now including civil rights attorney Marcus Green, who had successfully prosecuted police corruption cases in 3 states. Jonathan had insisted on the addition after Judge Marshall's death, recognizing they needed someone with experience handling cases where the stakes included physical danger. "Remember," Marcus advised as they approached the courthouse, "Judge, Winters has no known connections to the department, but that doesn't mean pressure hasn't been applied. Watch for subtle bias in procedural rulings." Judge Rebecca Winters, appointed to replace the recused Judge Thompson, had a reputation for strict adherence to procedural rules. On paper, she seemed ideal, a former civil rights attorney with no ties to local law enforcement. But Alexandria had learned the hard way how deep the corruption ran. The jury selection process immediately revealed troubling patterns. Despite a diverse jury pool, the prosecution used peremptory challenges to strike nearly every black prospective juror. When Jonathan raised a Batson challenge, arguing this constituted racial discrimination, Judge Winters seemed genuinely concerned. "Counsel, you need to provide race-neutral explanations for these strikes," she instructed the prosecutor. "Your Honor, these strikes were based solely on questionnaire responses indicating potential bias against law enforcement," the prosecutor claimed smoothly. Marcus leaned over to Alexandria. "That's their cover. They asked leading questions specifically, designed to elicit responses they could use to justify strikes." Judge Winters allowed some challenges but disallowed others, resulting in a jury with only 2 black members out of 12 in a district that was 40% black. It wasn't ideal, but better than Alexandria had feared. Opening statements set, the opposing narratives in stark contrast. The prosecution painted Alexandria as an entitled elitist, playing the race card to avoid drug charges. Jonathan countered with a powerful narrative of systematic racial profiling, evidence planting, and institutional cover-up. "This case isn't just about one traffic stop," Jonathan told the jury. "It's about whether we truly believe in equal justice under law, or whether some badges place certain officers above the law they've sworn to uphold." The prosecution's first tactical move was filing a motion to exclude any reference to Alexandria's professional background or pending appointment to Homeland Security, arguing it was irrelevant to the charges and prejudicial. "Your Honor," the prosecutor argued, "Ms. Washington's employment history has no bearing on whether she possessed illegal substances. She's attempting to use her connections to influence the jury." To Alexandria's dismay, Judge Winters largely agreed. "While complete exclusion would be inappropriate, I am limiting testimony regarding the defendant's career to bare facts. No references to specific accomplishments, pending appointments, or character assessments from colleagues." "They're trying to strip away your credibility," Marcus whispered. "Make you just another defendant instead of a respected Justice Department attorney being framed." The prosecution's case proceeded with a parade of officers testifying to the legitimacy of the traffic stop, the discovery of drugs, and Alexandria's belligerent attitude. Each account contained carefully aligned details, suggesting coordination, yet enough minor variations to appear authentic. The defense team's cross-examinations were surgical, exposing contradictions and improbabilities. Jonathan forced Officer Brennan to admit he couldn't explain why his body camera was deactivated during a routine traffic stop. Marcus got Sullivan to contradict his previous testimony about where he was standing when he discovered the drugs. Several officers grew visibly uncomfortable when questioned about their relationships with the police union president or Judge Thompson. But the most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source. The prosecution called Dr. Eleanor Reed, a toxicologist, to testify about the substance found in Alexandria's car. "Dr. Reed, based on your analysis, what is your conclusion about the substance recovered from the defendant's vehicle?" the prosecutor asked. "The substance was consistent with cocaine, approximately 3 grams, Dr. Reed stated. During cross-examination, Jonathan approached carefully. "Dr. Reed, when did you perform this analysis?" 3 days after the arrest, as per protocol. "And Who delivered the evidence to your laboratory? Officer Sullivan signed the chain of custody form. Jonathan showed her a document. Is this the form in question? Yes, that's my signature acknowledging receipt. And the evidence number on this form? Evidence tag DRJK 421. Jonathan then produced another document. This is the original evidence, logged from the night of Ms. Washington's arrest. The substance allegedly found in her car was logged as evidence tag DRJK 394. Can you explain the discrepancy? Dr. Reed looked genuinely confused. I can't, these should match. This revelation of a broken chain of custody created visible alarm among the prosecution team. They huddled in whispered consultation while Jonathan hammered the point home to the jury. Either evidence had been mishandled or more likely replaced entirely. What we're seeing, Jonathan told the jury during a particularly effective moment, is not incompetence, but deliberate manipulation of evidence to frame an innocent woman. Media coverage of the trial split along predictable lines. Conservative outlets emphasized Alexandria's elite legal connections, suggesting she was receiving special treatment. Progressive outlets highlighted the mounting evidence of police misconduct. Social media exploded with opinions, the hashtag #OurJusticeForAlexandria, trending nationally. Throughout the proceedings, Alexandria maintained a dignified presence. She dressed conservatively, spoke respectfully when addressed by the court, and never betrayed the anger and fear churning inside her. The jury seemed increasingly sympathetic as the trial progressed, several members paying especially close attention. During critical testimony about evidence tampering, a significant victory came when Judge Winters finally allowed Alexandria's phone recording into evidence, overruling prosecution objections after Marcus presented irrefutable precedent from multiple federal circuits. The law is clear, Judge Winters stated. Citizens have the right to record public officials performing public duties in public spaces. The recording is admissible. The courtroom fell silent as the audio played. Though somewhat muffled, Sullivan's voice was clearly audible, announcing he'd found something, immediately after Alexandria had seen him place his hand in his pocket. The sequence unmistakably supported her claim of evidence planting. During a recess, Alexandria discovered something disturbing. A small electronic device had been attached beneath her car, professional-grade tracking technology not available to civilians. The message was clear. She was under constant surveillance, her movements tracked, her private life invaded. Marcus insisted they document the discovery, but not remove the device. Let them think we haven't found it, he advised. We can use this. As the trial's first week concluded, the prosecution's case was showing significant cracks. Judge Winters had proven more impartial than expected, ruling on evidence based on law rather than bias. The jury seemed increasingly skeptical of police testimony. For the first time since her ordeal began, Alexandria allowed herself a small measure of hope. That hope was tempered by the knowledge that the most dangerous actors in this drama hadn't yet revealed their full hand. The tracking device proved. The surveillance was ongoing. Judge Marshall's death remained officially unsolved, but hung over the proceedings like a shadow. Alexandria couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming, that her opponents wouldn't accept defeat through normal legal channels. Her instincts proved correct. When returning to their hotel that evening, Jonathan received an anonymous call. "Drop the case or the next funeral will be hers," a digitally altered voice warned before disconnecting. Security around Alexandria was immediately tightened. But, as Maya soberly observed, they don't need to get to you physically to destroy you. They just need to control the narrative. The prosecution's case continued to unravel as the second week of trial began. Their star witness, a laboratory technician named Ellis, who had supposedly verified the drugs found in Alexandria's car, arrived in court, looking visibly distressed. His hands trembled as he was sworn in, his eyes darting nervously toward the section where police officers sat watching. "Mr. Ellis," the prosecutor began confidently, "please explain your findings regarding the substance recovered from the defendant's vehicle." Ellis cleared his throat repeatedly. The substance was consistent with cocaine. And the quantity? Approximately 3 grams, enough to indicate intent to distribute rather than personal use. The prosecutor nodded, pleased. No further questions. During cross-examination, Jonathan approached carefully, noting the witness's unusual demeanor. Mr. Ellis, when did you perform this analysis? 2 days after the arrest, Ellis replied, not meeting Jonathan's eyes. That's interesting, Jonathan said, because according to the laboratory logs, you were on vacation those days. In fact, you were in Cancun, Mexico. We've verified this. They're with the airline and your resort. Ellis paled visibly. After a long silence, he looked directly at Judge Winters. Your Honor, I need to modify my testimony. Proceed with caution, Mr. Ellis, Judge Winters warned. You are under oath. I never tested the substance, Ellis admitted, his voice barely audible. I was instructed to sign the verification form when I returned from vacation. I was told. It would be career suicide to refuse. The courtroom erupted. Judge Winters banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order. The prosecutor demanded a sidebar, which Judge Winters granted. After intense discussion, she addressed the court. In light of this testimony, we will recess for the day. Mr. Ellis, you are instructed not to discuss your testimony with anyone. Court security will escort you home. As the courtroom cleared, Alexandria watched Ellis leave under guard, his shoulders hunched, a man who clearly expected retaliation. Her fear for his safety proved well-founded. The next morning, Ellis failed to return to court. When officers checked his apartment, they found it empty, clothing gone, personal items missing. He had fled. Judge Winters was furious. This apparent witness intimidation strikes at the very heart of our justice system, she declared. I am instructing the district attorney's office to investigate immediately. The pattern repeated with other witnesses. Alexandria's former colleague from the Justice Department, who had initially agreed to testify about her character and professional ethics, called Jonathan the night before her scheduled appearance. I can't do it, she said, voice shaking. Someone approached my daughter at college yesterday. They knew which dorm she lives in, her class schedule. They said they were just checking in. I'm sorry, Alex, I have kids. Others reported similar incidents. A neighbor who had witnessed part of Alexandria's arrest received repeated traffic tickets in a single week. A store owner whose security camera had captured the officers following Alexandria before the stop found his business suddenly subject to multiple code violation inspections. The intimidation wasn't limited to witnesses. An anonymous juror contacted the court clerk, reporting, being followed home by an unmarked car. Judge Winters questioned the jury privately, finding 3 members had experienced similar concerning incidents. Though she instructed them to report any further issues immediately, the damage was done. Fear had infected the proceedings. Meanwhile, Alexandria's team scored a major breakthrough. A tech expert working with their investigator managed to recover deleted text messages from a phone belonging to a former police department administrator. The messages revealed an explicit conspiracy between officers Brennan, Sullivan, and several senior officers to target uppity minorities in affluent neighborhoods. Sullivan got another one today. Black female lawyer type in a Mercedes, acting all superior. Brennan planting the usual package. Sullivan, of course, these people need to learn. Captain Davis, good work. Keep those neighborhoods clean. Sullivan, Judge T says he'll handle the court side if she fights it. Jonathan immediately filed these messages as evidence, and Judge Winters admitted them over strenuous prosecution objections. For the first time, there was documentary evidence of the conspiracy Alexandria had alleged. The prosecution, desperate to regain control of the narrative, convinced Judge Winters to issue a limited gag order, preventing Alexandria from discussing case details with the media. Notably, the gag order did not extend to the police department or prosecution, who continued giving daily press briefings, portraying Alexandria as exploiting her connections. It's a one-way gag, Marcus observed bitterly. They silence you while continuing to control the public narrative. News of Alexandria's pending appointment to Homeland Security finally leaked to the press, though the source remained unknown. Rather than lending credibility to her claims as Alexandria had hoped, many outlets framed it as a desperate attempt to influence the proceedings. Washington claims federal appointment to evade local charges, read one headline. A prominent conservative commentator questioned on national television whether pulling the race card and claiming a high-level government job isn't just the desperate move of someone caught red-handed. The pressure intensified when Captain Reynolds, who had initially seemed sympathetic to Alexandria at the police station, testified for the prosecution. Despite previously telling Alexandria he would look into the officer's behavior, he now claimed he had no recollection of such a conversation and that Alexandria had been combative and uncooperative during processing. Captain Reynolds, Alexandria whispered to Jonathan during this testimony, told me personally he had concerns about those officers. He promised an investigation. People's memories get very selective when their pensions are at risk, Jonathan replied grimly. That evening, Alexandria received a cryptic text from an unknown number. Sister Park, 8 p.m. Despite her team's concerns about safety, Alexandria insisted Maya meet her privately in a public park near their childhood home. She suspected the message came from someone unwilling to be associated with her case, but potentially offering crucial information. Her instinct proved correct. As they sat on a bench overlooking a playground, a woman in a hoodie approached cautiously, constantly scanning her surroundings. Alexandria recognized her as an administrative assistant from the police department. "I can't stay long," the woman said without preamble. "They're watching everyone connected to this case." "Who's they?" Maya asked. "A group within the department calls themselves the Shield. It started as just a fraternity of officers, but it's become something else. Judges, prosecutors, city officials all involved. They target minorities they think don't know their place. Plant evidence, fabricate charges, make problems disappear for members." "How many cases like mine?" Alexandria asked. "Dozens over the years, maybe hundreds. Most people can't fight back like you." Before leaving, the woman passed Alexandria a flash drive. "Everything I could gather without being caught. Names, dates, case numbers. Be careful. The last person who tried to expose them ended up dead in a robbery." Alexandria and Maya exchanged a grim look, both thinking of Judge Marshall. The meeting had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it was enough. As they left the park separately, Alexandria noticed a dark sedan trailing Maya's car. Her stomach clenched with fear. They had been watched after all. Maya called 2 hours later, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Someone grabbed me outside. At my house, 2 men, ski masks. They didn't hurt me, just held me for about 20 minutes. Oh my God, Maya, they said to tell you this is your final warning. Drop the case or next time we won't be so gentle." Alex, they knew about the children's school schedule, their teachers' names. Alexandria's blood turned to ice. "Where are you now?" "We're safe. I took the kids to Mom's place upstate. They think it's a surprise vacation." The implicit threat against Maya's children crossed a line Alexandria hadn't anticipated. Even her worst enemies would cross. The stakes had escalated beyond her personal vindication or even exposing department corruption. Now her family's safety hung in the balance. Have you ever had to choose between fighting for justice and protecting those you love? Comment number 1 if you believe Alexandria should prioritize her family's safety over the case. Like if you think she should use her soon-to-be government position to fight corruption from within instead, and subscribe to see what impossible choice she makes next. Will Alexandria back down to protect her loved ones, or will she find a way to keep them safe while still bringing these corrupt officials to justice? The flash drive proved to be the evidentiary equivalent of a nuclear bomb. Alexandria and her legal team worked through the night, sifting through hundreds of documents, internal emails, arrest records, disciplinary reports scrubbed from official files, and most damning of all, a spreadsheet tracking special handling cases, predominantly involving minorities in affluent areas who had been targeted for false arrests. "This is organized, systematic civil rights violation," Jonathan said, his voice hoarse after hours reviewing the files. "Not just Brennan and Sullivan, at least 27 officers appear to be actively involved, plus judges, prosecutors, even 2 city council members." Marcus nodded grimly. "They call themselves the Shield, fraternal on the surface, criminal enterprise underneath." The documents revealed a sophisticated operation. The Shield operated as a secretive group within the police department and justice system, identifying minorities they deemed out of place in wealthy neighborhoods. then manufacturing reasons to arrest them. The goal wasn't always prosecution often. The intimidation and humiliation were the point, sending a message about who belongs where. For some targets, like Alexandria, who had resources to fight back, the group would escalate to evidence planting, witness intimidation, and if necessary, violence. The Shield protected its members through promotions, favorable assignments, and mutual defense against complaints. Officers who refused to participate found themselves isolated, assigned dangerous, beats without backup, or framed for misconduct. "We can't take this directly to the local authorities," Alexandria decided. "Too many are implicated. We need federal intervention." Through secure channels, Alexandria contacted the FBI's Civil Rights Division, arranging an emergency meeting. Away from the courthouse, Special Agent Garcia arrived with 3 colleagues, their expressions grave as they reviewed the evidence. "This is one of the most extensive corruption cases I've seen in 20 years, Garcia admitted. "It will take time to build proper federal cases against all involved." "Time is something we don't have," Alexandria replied. "They've already killed Judge Marshall, threatened my sister and her children, and intimidated witnesses in my ongoing trial." Garcia nodded. "We'll expedite. Starting tonight, we're placing your family under federal protection. Meanwhile, we'll begin parallel investigations into the Shield members." By morning, the FBI had moved Maya and her children to a secure location and assigned protective details to Alexandria and her legal team. The pressure created by federal interest was immediately apparent. Judge Winters received a visit from FBI agents during the lunch recess, emerging visibly shaken. When court resumed, her demeanor had shifted subtly but unmistakably toward greater impartiality. News of the FBI investigation leaked quickly. Alexandria's team hadn't planned this, but the effect was electric. Several officers named in the Shield, documents suddenly called in sick. A prosecutor assigned to Alexandria's case recused himself without explanation. The police union president held an emergency press conference denying any knowledge of organized misconduct within the department. The prosecution, recognizing their case was imploding, made their first settlement offer. All charges dropped in exchange for Alexandria, signing a non-disclosure agreement and waiving rights to sue the department or individual officers. "They're in panic mode," Marcus observed after reviewing the offer. "They know what's coming." "Refuse," Alexandria instructed. Without hesitation, "I'm not helping them bury this." The FBI's involvement created a new dynamic. Evidence that had been lost suddenly reappeared. Officers previously unwilling to speak began providing statements confirming the Shield's existence and operations. A court clerk came forward with recordings of Judge Thompson discussing how to handle Alexandria's case with his brother before recusing himself. As federal pressure mounted, cracks appeared in the Shield's unity. Junior officers, fearing prosecution, began offering testimony against superior officers in exchange for leniency. The police chief, initially defiant in defending his department, requested early retirement. Captain Reynolds, who had testified against Alexandria despite his earlier sympathies, contacted her attorney seeking to correct the record. Alexandria's case had transformed from a simple drug charge into the catalyst for exposing decades of systematic civil rights violations. News coverage shifted dramatically, with major outlets now investigating the Shield's history of targeting minorities. Reporters uncovered dozens of similar cases where evidence had been planted, witnesses intimidated, or charges fabricated against minorities in affluent neighborhoods. The prosecution's case continued disintegrating in court. Their remaining expert, witnesses withdrew citing scheduling conflicts. Officers scheduled to testify developed sudden memory problems about key events. Judge Winters, now acutely aware of federal scrutiny, ruled consistently on the law rather than showing any bias. With their case collapsing, the prosecution made an improved offer. All charges dropped, a public apology from the department, and a monetary settlement. Again, Alexandria refused. "This was never about money or personal vindication," she told her team. "It's about systemic accountability." During the trial's third week, the FBI arrested 3 Shield members attempting to destroy records at the police department's records division. The arrests created a cascade effect, with multiple officers and officials seeking immunity deals in exchange for testimony. The wall of silence that had protected the Shield for decades was crumbling. "We've identified at least 15 cases similar to yours just in the past year," Agent Garcia informed Alexandria during a secure meeting. Most victims couldn't fight back effectively. Many pled guilty to crimes they didn't commit: lost jobs, housing, custody of children. Alexandria felt physically ill thinking about the lives damaged or destroyed by this system. Her own ordeal, though traumatic, had come with advantages most victims lacked: legal knowledge, professional connections, financial resources, and soon, a powerful government position from which to enforce change. The most disturbing discovery came when investigators found connections between several deaths initially classified as accidents or robberies and Shield operations. Beyond Judge Marshall, at least 3 other individuals who had challenged Shield members or threatened to expose corruption had died under suspicious circumstances over the past decade. They were willing to kill to protect their system, Alexandria told Maya during a secure call to her sister's safe house. "We were right to take the threat seriously." "Are you safe?" Maya asked. "FBI protection around the clock," Alexandria assured her. "The Shield is collapsing. Too many members are turning on each other now." The evidence of organized civil rights violations had grown so overwhelming that Alexandria's personal case seemed almost secondary. However, she insisted on continuing to trial rather than accepting dismissal. "The public record matters," she explained to her team. "A full acquittal based on evidence of misconduct creates stronger precedent than charges simply being dropped." The prosecution's case disintegrated. Alexandria won a crucial victory. Judge Winters formally admitted her FBI appointment into evidence, allowing the jury to understand the full context of why she had been targeted. The prosecution had fought desperately to exclude this information, knowing it destroyed any remaining credibility in their claim that Alexandria was an ordinary drug offender. The turning point came when FBI agents arrested Officers Brennan and Sullivan attempting to access Alexandria's hotel room while she was in court. The officers had somehow obtained key cards, despite enhanced security measures. In their possession were latex gloves and a small quantity of drugs, similar to those allegedly found in Alexandria's car months earlier, apparent preparations for a second framing attempt. Their arrest broke open the last resistance. Senior Shield members, seeing their protection evaporating, began making immunity deals. The mayor announced an independent investigation into department practices. The Justice Department launched a pattern or practice investigation into systematic civil rights violations. Alexandria had done more than clear her name. She had exposed a decades-old criminal conspiracy operating within the justice system itself, targeting minorities who dared enter spaces some believed should remain segregated. What had begun as a simple traffic stop had evolved into one of the most significant civil rights cases in recent history. As she prepared for the final phase of trial, Alexandria received an unexpected message from the president. "You've already done the job I appointed you to do, protecting Homeland security by exposing those who corrupt justice from within. The position still awaits when you're ready." The collapse of the prosecution's case should have marked the end of Alexandria's ordeal, but the Shield had one final desperate card to play. 3 days before closing arguments, Jonathan Hartwell received photographs showing his teenage daughter entering her high school, his son at soccer practice, and his wife shopping alone. The implied threat required no explanatory note. Jonathan called an emergency meeting with Alexandria, Marcus, and their investigative team. "I can't continue as lead counsel," he stated, his voice tight with suppressed rage and fear. "They've made it clear my family is in danger." "Jonathan, the FBI can provide protection," Alexandria offered, though she understood his impossible position. For how long? These people have demonstrated they're willing to wait months or years to take revenge. I can't have my family looking over their shoulders forever. His face crumpled with shame. "I'm sorry, Alexandria. I believe in this case with every fiber of my being, but I can't risk my children." Marcus immediately stepped forward. "I'll take over as lead counsel. My family already has protection from previous cases against police corruption. While Alexandria understood Jonathan's decision completely, his withdrawal represented exactly what the Shield wanted, creating fear so pervasive that even the most committed allies would abandon the fight. It was their operational method, make the cost of resistance so high that surrender became the only rational choice. With Marcus now leading her defense, they restructured their strategy. The transition wasn't seamless. Marcus had a different, courtroom style, more aggressive and less methodical than Jonathan's careful approach. Judge Winters granted a 3-day recess to allow the new lead counsel to prepare, but the disruption was precisely what the Shield had intended. Alexandria's remaining evidence had been meticulously organized by Jonathan. As Marcus reviewed the files, he discovered critical exhibits had been tampered with. Computer files showed modification timestamps during hours when the legal team's offices were supposed to be secured. Photographs had been subtly altered in ways that undermined their evidentiary value. Witness statements contained small but significant changes to dates and times, creating inconsistencies that hadn't existed in the originals. They've had access to our files, Marcus concluded grimly. Probably for weeks. Alexandria's team implemented new security protocols, creating triple backups of all evidence and storing them in separate, secure locations. But the damage to their carefully constructed case was substantial. Evidence that had appeared rock solid now contained just enough inconsistencies to create reasonable doubt if presented to a jury already confused by the change in legal representation. When trial resumed, Alexandria herself was called to testify. Taking the stand was a calculated risk, exposing her to cross-examination, but allowing the jury to hear directly from the woman at the center of the case. Marcus prepared her thoroughly, anticipating the prosecution's approach. The prosecutor approached her cross-examination with unexpected hostility, clearly under pressure to salvage something from the collapsing case. Ms. Washington, isn't it true that you've used your connections in Washington to pressure witnesses in this case? Objection, Marcus called immediately. Assumes facts, not in evidence. Sustained, Judge Winters ruled. The prosecutor pivoted. Ms. Washington, why do you believe these officers would target you specifically? Isn't it more likely that you simply made a mistake and are now using your privilege to avoid consequences? Alexandria remained composed. The evidence shows these officers have targeted numerous minorities in affluent neighborhoods as part of a systematic practice. The documents recovered from the Shield's records detail this pattern clearly. I wasn't targeted because I'm special. I was targeted because I fit their profile, black in an upscale neighborhood, driving a nice car. And your supposed recording of the incident, the recording that mysteriously disappeared then reappeared, isn't it possible that was edited to support your claims? The FBI's forensic analysis confirmed the recording's authenticity, Alexandria replied calmly. Their report is in evidence as Exhibit 42B. Throughout hours of questioning, Alexandria maintained her composure despite the prosecutor's increasingly desperate attempts to provoke an emotional response. Her testimony was precise, factual, and devastating to the prosecution's remaining case. Jurors visibly responded to her dignified demeanor, several nodding at particularly compelling points. The prosecution's final attempt to salvage their case came in the form of an audio expert who testified that Alexandria's phone recording had been potentially altered. Marcus's cross-examination was brutal, forcing the expert to admit he hadn't actually analyzed the specific recording, but was speaking about theoretical possibilities. So you have no evidence this specific recording was altered in any way? Marcus pressed. Not directly, no, the expert admitted reluctantly. And you're aware the FBI forensic lab certified its authenticity? I wasn't provided that information. By the trial's final days, the remaining prosecution witnesses appeared uncomfortable on the stand, clearly aware they were on the losing side of a case that now had national attention. Several seemed deliberately vague in their testimony, creating distance between themselves and the officers at the center of the scandal. Alexandria's confidence grew as the case neared conclusion. The jury seemed engaged and sympathetic. Judge Winters had abandoned any pretense of bias under the watchful eyes of federal observers. The media narrative had completely reversed, with Alexandria now portrayed as a courageous whistleblower rather than a defendant. The police department, scrambling to salvage its reputation, announced that Officers Brennan and Sullivan had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation, a belated gesture that fooled no one. The mayor held a press conference promising complete cooperation with federal investigators and a top-to-bottom review of department practices. On the day scheduled for closing arguments, Alexandria arrived at the courthouse with renewed hope. Marcus had prepared a powerful summation, synthesizing the mountain of evidence now supporting her claims. The prosecution, having lost most of their case, would likely offer little resistance. Acquittal seemed all but certain. Then came chaos. As the court prepared to convene, gunshots echoed through the building. Panic erupted as security officers rushed to evacuate the area. In the confusion, Alexandria was separated from her security detail, pushed along with the fleeing crowd toward the exits. Outside, amid the sea of terrified people, Alexandria glimpsed a familiar face, Officer Sullivan. Not in custody, as reported, but free and watching her with undisguised hatred. Their eyes met briefly before he disappeared into the crowd. The message was clear. The shield was wounded, but still dangerous. Later reports confirmed a disturbing sequence of events. A man had entered the courthouse with a concealed weapon, fired several shots into the ceiling, then escaped in the ensuing chaos. No one was injured, but the disruption achieved its purpose. Court was suspended indefinitely, the jury sequestered, for their safety, and Alexandria's momentum interrupted at the critical moment before closing arguments. This wasn't random, Alexandria told Agent Garcia as they regrouped at a secure location. They couldn't win in court, so they created chaos to derail the process. Garcia nodded grimly. Sullivan's bail situation is unclear. Records show he was released yesterday, but there's no documentation of a hearing or who posted bond. The shield still has people in the system, Alexandria concluded, people with access and authority. That evening, Judge Winters announced the trial would resume in 3 days following a security review. Alexandria's team used the delay to regroup, strengthen their evidence backup protocols, and prepare for further disruption attempts. But the damage had been done. The rhythm of the trial had been broken, the jury's focus disturbed. The carefully constructed narrative interrupted at its crescendo. They're desperate, Marcus observed during strategy sessions, which makes them more dangerous than ever. Alexandria agreed. The shield was facing not just the collapse of her case, but the unraveling of their entire operation and possible federal charges. People with nothing left to lose often take the most extreme actions. The courthouse shooting, though causing no physical injuries, demonstrated how far they were willing to go to maintain their power. As the trial date approached again, Alexandria couldn't shake the feeling that the shield had one final move planned, something they believed would stop not just her case, but the broader investigations their actions had triggered. The question wasn't if they would strike again, but how and when. When the trial finally resumed, the atmosphere in the courtroom had fundamentally changed. Armed marshals stood at every entrance. The gallery, once packed with supporters and media, was half empty, many too frightened to return after the shooting. The jurors appeared visibly tense, several glancing nervously toward the doors throughout proceedings. Marcus delivered a powerful closing argument, systematically dismantling the prosecution's case while highlighting the extensive evidence of corruption and conspiracy. The prosecution's closing was brief and subdued, focusing on procedural technicalities rather than substantive arguments, the strategy of attorneys who know they've lost but must go through the motions. Judge Winters delivered careful instructions to the jury, emphasizing they must consider only evidence presented in court, not media coverage or personal impressions. As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, Alexandria felt cautious optimism. Despite the shield's desperate tactics, justice seemed within reach. The first day of deliberations passed without a verdict. On the second day, a note from the jury foreman requested clarification on chain of custody rules for evidence. By the third day, rumors circulated that the jury was deadlocked. Judge Winters summoned attorneys to chambers to discuss the situation. "The jury appears to be at an impasse," she informed them. 6 for acquittal, 6 for conviction, with neither side willing to reconsider. "That's impossible given the evidence," Marcus protested. "The case for misconduct is overwhelming." Judge Winters sighed. 2 jurors have reported being followed home. Another found her car tires slashed. Despite sequestration, they've been reached. Alexandria felt a chill. Even with federal involvement, the Shield's influence remained powerful enough to compromise half the jury. After 3 more days of fruitless deliberation, Judge Winters made the inevitable announcement. "This court declares a mistrial due to a deadlocked jury." The prosecution immediately moved to schedule a retrial, but Alexandria knew what this really meant. The Shield had achieved their immediate goal, derailing a verdict that would have vindicated her and cemented evidence of their conspiracy. Mistrial gave them time to regroup, destroy evidence and intimidate more witnesses. Her fears were confirmed when the police department announced officers Brennan and Sullivan would return to modified duty pending further review of evidence. The carefully worded statement avoided any acknowledgement of wrongdoing while presenting the department as committed to thorough investigation. That night, Alexandria received a frantic call from her security detail. "Ms. Washington, there's a fire at your apartment building. Everyone's being evacuated." Alexandria watched from a block away as firefighters battled the blaze that had started coincidentally in her unit. By morning, her home was a charred shell, personal belongings destroyed, years of photos and mementos lost forever. Fire investigators would later carefully classify the cause as undetermined, though accelerant traces suggested arson. The message couldn't have been clearer. The Shield was retaliating, demonstrating that even a mistrial wasn't enough. They wanted her destroyed completely. Media coverage of the fire took an unexpected turn when several outlets began questioning whether Alexandria might have staged the incident for sympathy. Her police source suggested the timing was suspiciously convenient given the mistrial. The narrative shift was subtle but effective, introducing doubt about Alexandria's victimhood at a crucial moment. Despite these setbacks, Alexandria finally received good news. The president had decided to formally announce her appointment as Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security immediately, rather than waiting for her legal situation to resolve. The administration stands firmly behind Alexandria Washington, the White House press secretary stated. Her experience, including her recent ordeal, makes her uniquely qualified to address systemic issues in law enforcement and homeland security. The public announcement forced the police department into damage control. They issued a carefully worded apology, acknowledging procedural lapses in Alexandria's case without admitting deliberate misconduct. The mayor promised a complete review of departmental practices and full cooperation with federal authorities. But behind the scenes, the Shield was actively destroying evidence. Alexandria received word from Agent Garcia that several key department servers had been accidentally wiped during routine maintenance. Physical files connected to cases identified in the Shield's records had gone missing from storage. Witnesses reported being approached by police representatives offering assistance with relocation if they reconsidered their statements. The FBI investigation continued gathering momentum despite these obstacles. Agents executed search warrants on multiple officers' homes, the police union headquarters, and even Judge Thompson's chambers. The coordinated raids yielded substantial evidence, confirming the Shield's operations, including financial records, showing unusual payments to officers, judges, and witnesses in cases against Shield targets. Alexandria's security detail discovered something equally alarming, a sophisticated assassination plan targeting her during an upcoming public appearance. The plot had been intercepted through electronic surveillance of known Shield members, revealing coordination between current and former officers planning to stage what would appear to be a random shooting during a press conference. This has escalated beyond corruption to active terrorism, Agent Garcia told Alexandria during an emergency briefing. "We're accelerating our timeline for arrests. As federal preparations for mass arrests proceeded, officers Brennan and Sullivan suddenly disappeared. Their homes were found empty, Personal effects gone, financial accounts drained. Border Patrol was alerted, airports monitored, but the men who had begun Alexandria's ordeal with a simple traffic stop had vanished. The most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. During a secure call with Maya, her sister made a stunning admission. "Alex, there's something I need to tell you," Maya said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've been working with the FBI for almost 2 years." "What?" Alexandria could barely process the words. "My research on racial profiling patterns caught their attention. They approached me about gathering data on potential civil rights violations in the department. When you were arrested, I recognized the pattern immediately. It matched exactly what we'd been investigating." Alexandria felt momentarily betrayed that her sister had kept such a significant secret, then understood the necessity. "You couldn't tell me because I was a potential nominee for a federal position." "Exactly. Operational security required complete separation. But everything happening now, the FBI investigation, the raids, the evidence collection, it was already in motion before your arrest. The Shield made a catastrophic mistake targeting you. They accelerated their own downfall. This revelation recontextualized everything." Alexandria's ordeal hadn't just been about her challenging the Shield. She had unwittingly become the catalyst for exposing a corruption network that federal authorities had already been investigating. Her case had provided the perfect public platform to bring their operations into the light. Alexandria Washington stood before a packed auditorium in the Department of Homeland Security headquarters, her right hand raised as she took the oath of office. The solemnity of the moment contrasted with the turmoil of the preceding months. As she recited the words pledging to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, Alexandria reflected on how literally she had already lived that oath. "I, Alexandria Washington, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic." The ceremony marked a new chapter, yet the story that had brought her here remained unfinished. While Alexandria prepared for her new role, the investigation into the Shield had expanded dramatically. What began as an inquiry into 2 officers' misconduct had revealed a nationwide pattern of similar organizations operating within police departments across the country. Alexandria's first official act as Deputy Secretary was creating a specialized task force on law enforcement accountability, bringing together experts from civil rights, law enforcement, and community organizations to develop new oversight mechanisms and training protocols. The task force would have actual enforcement power, not just advisory capacity, a direct result of Alexandria's personal experience with how easily systems could be compromised. 3 weeks after her swearing in, Alexandria received news that officers Brennan and Sullivan had been captured attempting to cross into Mexico with false identification. Their arrest led to further revelations as both men, facing multiple federal charges, began offering information in exchange for leniency. The Shield network unraveled completely under federal investigation. 63 officers, 12 judges, 8 prosecutors and numerous city officials were ultimately indicted on charges ranging from civil rights violations to evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and in several cases, accessory to murder. Judge Thompson found himself facing particularly serious charges after financial records revealed he had received substantial payments coinciding with favorable rulings in cases involving Shield members. During congressional testimony about systemic racism in law enforcement, Alexandria spoke with the unique authority of someone who had experienced injustice from both sides of the system. "What happened to me was not an anomaly," she told the packed hearing room. "The difference is that I had resources, knowledge, and eventually a platform. Most victims of these practices have none of these advantages. They accept plea deals for crimes they didn't commit because the alternative fighting a system designed to crush them seems impossible." Captain Reynolds, who had initially shown sympathy before testifying against Alexandria under pressure, became a key witness for the prosecution after the Shield's collapse. Alexandria met with him privately before his testimony. "I should have done more," he admitted, unable to meet her eyes. "I knew what was happening, but convinced myself speaking up would accomplish nothing except ruining my career. That calculation fares exactly what allows these systems to perpetuate, Alexandria replied. Individual moral compromises accumulate into systemic corruption. The trials of SHIELD members became national news, with each revelation further exposing how deeply the corruption had penetrated the justice system. Alexandria followed the proceedings closely, though her new position kept her from attending in person. When officers Brennan and Sullivan were finally sentenced to 18 years each for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and conspiracy, Alexandria felt not triumph, but a somber satisfaction that accountability had finally arrived. 6. Months after beginning her role at Homeland Security, Alexandria made an unannounced visit to the federal prison, where Brennan and Sullivan were serving their sentences. The meeting wasn't publicized. This wasn't about optics or revenge. It was about closure. The men looked smaller in prison jumpsuits than they had in police uniforms, their swagger replaced by wary resignation. They seemed shocked by Alexandria's appearance in the prison visiting room. "Why are you here?" Sullivan asked, hostility barely contained. "To make something clear," Alexandria replied calmly. "This was never about you personally. It was about the system you represented and abused. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about change." Brennan stared at the table. "Easy to say when you've won." "I didn't win," Alexandria corrected him. "The Constitution won. Equal protection under law won. The same principles that protect me now protect you, ensuring fair trials, preventing cruel punishment, guaranteeing basic rights regardless of public opinion." Sullivan looked up, confusion replacing anger. "You're the reason we're here." "No," Alexandria said firmly. "Your choices put you here. The system you corrupted ultimately held you accountable, as it should hold anyone accountable, regardless of position or power." As she left the prison, Alexandria felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The cycle of retaliation and revenge that the SHIELD had perpetuated for decades had been broken, not with more of the same, but with something more powerful: equal justice under law, applied without fear or favor. 1 year after her appointment, Alexandria returned to her home city to address the graduating class of the police academy. The department had been transformed under new leadership, with comprehensive reforms implemented following the SHIELD investigations. The graduating class reflected that change, diverse, community-oriented, trained in de-escalation and constitutional policing. Looking out at the young officers, Alexandria saw hope for a system that could protect and serve all communities equally. Her closing words to them captured the lesson of her journey. "The badge you receive today symbolizes not power over others, but responsibility toward them. Your authority comes with accountability. Your discretion must be guided by equal justice. And your true measure as officers will be how you treat those with the least power, not how you serve those with the most. This is the oath I took, and the oath you take today. Let us both honor it." Alexandria Washington's journey teaches us that systems of oppression persist when good people remain silent. Her case demonstrates how racism functions not just through individual prejudice, but through coordinated institutional power that protects itself at all costs. Most victims of such injustice lack Alexandria's resources and connections, forcing them to accept unfair outcomes. Yet her story also shows that determined resistance, meticulous documentation, and strategic alliances can overcome even deeply entrenched corruption. The initial traffic stop revealed a fundamental truth, that in America, success and credentials don't shield Black Americans from racism. Most importantly, Alexandria's triumph reminds us that true justice isn't about revenge, but transformation. By using her position not just for personal vindication, but systemic reform, she created lasting change. Her story proves that accountability is possible even when the odds seem overwhelming, and that fighting for justice requires not just moral clarity, but strategic persistence. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination from people who didn't know your true position or abilities? What would you have done in Alexandria's situation? Fight the system immediately, or gather evidence quietly? Comment below with your thoughts on institutional racism and what accountability should look like in law enforcement. If you believe stories exposing systemic injustice need to be shared, hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming discrimination. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that the fight for equality continues every day. Thank you for listening, and remember, true power isn't in a badge or title, but in unwavering commitment to justice for all.